Welcome to Lifestyle Solopreneur, the community for entrepreneurs who put lifestyle first. Join your host Flavia Barris as she interviews successful lifestyle solopreneurs and shares ideas to help you find the perfect balance between lifestyle, business, and self. Flavia is an attorney, marketing expert, and founder of several online academies. She's been featured in major media, including BBC World News, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Post, ESPN Television, and more. Join us for this episode of Lifestyle Solopreneur. Hey, Lifestyle Solopreneurs. Today we have the absolute privilege of speaking with Patricia Noel Drain. She is the author of 12 books, and I know how hard it is to write just one book. She has written 12, including What Should I Be When I Grow Up? Now That I'm 40, 50, 60. She's also the creator of numerous online programs. You may have heard of Your Gift is Your Niche, one of her very popular programs. Her programs help others discover their passion and their purpose in business and in life. She especially loves working with the new generation, the millennial, because they are changing the way we do business. Can't wait to talk to her about how they are doing that. Welcome to the show, Patricia.
Thank you so much, Flavia. I have been watching you for a long time now, and your podcasts are 10s on a scale of 1 to 10. No, they might be a 15.
Oh, well, thank you. It's always so great to connect with someone that was already a listener of the show for a couple of reasons. One is you already know the kinds of topics and things that we like to deep dive into, which is not just business, but also the life that drives our business and what we do in our free time and how we stay balanced. So I love that you are already a listener. It means you are already part of the tribe. You already value this journey, right? We're all on, which is to balance our life to create this life that's really enjoyable and worth living and that gives us drive and passion.
Agree.
So tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are now, because nobody just wakes up and has 12 books on the shelf that they've written. I mean, that is an accomplishment. Kudos on that. Tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming an author.
Yeah, so I got lucky. Years ago, I found my passion at a very early age because I was a school teacher. And here's just a hint for all of you listening. One way you know if you have discovered your passion, if you would do it for free anyway. And that's what happened to me when I was a school teacher. They paid me, and I'm holding all these little children's hands walking out of school thinking, now you guys didn't get paid, but I did. Isn't that strange? Because I loved that so much. But when reality came and I was going back into business after raising our family, I certainly didn't want to be making $18,000 a year as a school teacher. And so I decided to go into the real business world. And I got into the world of executive recruiting because I decided to find out what my ingredients were so that I could be happy in a job. And I had 7 of them. And when I got those 7 ingredients all put together, I actually put them in the book, What Should I Be When I Grow Up? Because I think it's really important for us to really understand ourselves and what makes us happy. So down the executive recruiting path I went. I became the top producer in the state of Arizona, which was no surprise because it had all of my ingredients but one. It just wasn't next door to my house. That's what was one of my ingredients, and I didn't get that. But when I became that recruiter and knew that I was interviewing people like you, placing you in the job of your dreams, it was my job of my dreams. So I decided I'm going to open my own. And I went in and said to him, can I have a division of my own, or can I be the educator here? And he said, oh, no. That's my wife's job. So I knew that I was going to have to take a year off. And I did because of the contract. And then I opened my own company. And that's where I made my biggest mistake, Flavia, is I created something that I thought I was supposed to create. So in other words, I went to work 8 to 6. Made the coffee, got the muffins, held the meetings, became the manager, became the CEO, put myself out of the desk of interviewing and putting you out to your dream job. And I just became the babysitter. And I hated it. And I could not figure out why, because it was a very lucrative position. But by the time my 4th company, I created 4 of them and sold 4 of them. And by the time I sold the last one, I said to my husband, I'm not going back into those walls. I'm doing it differently this time. And so for the first time, this is why I love your podcast so much, is because first of all, the name of it is the epitome of who I am. It's called a lifestyle solopreneur. And when I stepped into that role after owning those other companies, I thought I died and went to heaven. I've never worked another day in my life because I'm right back to the ingredients of what I love to do. I just don't have to to babysit a lot of people. I have maybe 10 virtual assistants right now, so I don't even have to have meetings except on Zoom. So yeah, I really know how to design. But see, for all those years, I had a business and lived my lifestyle around the business instead of what I do now. I have a lifestyle and I design my business around my lifestyle.
So that's so fascinating. Let's go back to that pivotal moment where you told your husband, like, I've realized this is not the path I want to be on, right? How many people have a similar work life where they feel this isn't my path, but then for whatever reason, they don't have that conversation with either themselves. In your case, it was your spouse, where you just acknowledge it and own it and decide you're going to make a change. Because I feel there's a lot of people that feel trapped in what they're doing. And how do you think you got from that moment where you realize this isn't for me to being brave enough or ambitious enough, or I don't know what that feeling is that got you over the hump to decide, you know what, not only have I realized this isn't for me, but I'm actually going to do something about it. Because there's a lot of people that could learn from you because they are at that moment before that pivotal conversation. They've recognized this isn't for them, whatever you're working in right now. If you're listening to this and you have that same feeling that Patricia had at the time where you're like, you know, I'm successful and I'm doing a good job and I'm punching the clock and I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing that society told me having a job or having a business was, but I'm very unhappy and I'm not living in my passion. What are you going to say to a person like that to get them to that next moment, which is actually doing something about it?
Well, I would not tell people to just, and I've said this for years, don't just quit that cash cow that you have over there and think you're going to live happily ever after. You really have to have some thought behind it, some savings behind it, and some support. So I had the support of my husband. And because, as I said, this was a very lucrative position I was giving up, owning this company. But I had enough in my savings also from selling the companies that I knew I could last for a while. Not a long while, but a while without making that kind of money again. You usually don't step out of something like that and then immediately start making 20, 30,000 a month. It doesn't happen that way. And it didn't happen that way. I had to just keep building and building. And I started working with an event, when I finally stepped back out after my contract, I, of course, opened my own and hired many executive recruiters. But when I stepped out into my solopreneur world, that's when I didn't even know how to do that. I didn't know how to hire a virtual assistant. I'd never done that before. So I had to get very clear, Flavia, on what it was. And that's what I would say to the listener. You have to get clear around what it is you love to do. And that's really one of the reasons that I went down this path about discovering your core and always knowing your gifts, and your gift is your niche. I did all of that because I saw the troubled people coming into my office all the time asking, well, now what am I supposed to do? And another girl just said to me just by maybe an hour ago, she said, Patricia, I got my degree. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. And that's really sad to me because nobody teaches us, and it's not our fault. It's just not taught in school, that whole thing of self-discovery. But I have been a self-discovery person myself my entire life. And so here's the sentence I put up on the whiteboard when I changed completely from executive recruiting into this law world that I knew nothing about. Maybe this sentence will help you. What can I do from anywhere in the world, helping the people I choose to help, but still make the money I deserve with what I already know? It's a big question, but I would put that up on my board. And every day I'd go to that board. For 6 months, I did this. And I would write down, well, I'll just be a speaker. Well, I don't want to just be a speaker. That means I'm on a plane all the time. Well, let's see, I'll be an author. Well, I've authored a lot of books. What am I going to sit in Barnes and Noble and sign books? That sounded awful. And I finally put up, I'll be a business mentor. I'm going to help other women grow their businesses. And that absolutely rang true to who I am and what I'm about. And so I've never worked a day in my life since I stepped away from that brick and mortar business. But please don't just jump off the cliff, because it's painful not to be making money like you're used to make. I don't even care if you make $2,000 a month. All of a sudden to go from 2,000 to zero is hard. So I'd keep the cash cow till I had the plan.
That's such good advice, solid advice. I've given that same advice many times myself to people because there's sort of a lead time that you have to take into account when you're starting a new business. It's very rare to start making an income on day one. Even if you start servicing a client on day one, you may not invoice them for a month, and then they may take a couple of weeks to pay you. And so there is this buffer you have to build in. And the more of a buffer you have, the more sort of risks you can take, the more strategic you can be, because you'll actually have some runway, right?
Yep. Yep.
And it is important to do that. We focus so much on this podcast on lifestyle design, sort of like designing that space outside of work so that we reserve white space in our calendar and time for hobbies and friends and family and all the things that are important to us, like our passions. But you're right. We don't always focus so much on the career design where we have to do both things. We have to figure out what we do with the time that's not quote unquote working. But we really have to be strategic about, well, what does our work look like? Because the closer your work feels to a hobby and fun, like when you were crossing the street, holding the little kids' hands, and you were thinking like, this is wonderful. Like this, I'm helping these little kids by leading them and teaching them and giving them comfort and, holding their hand across the street. You didn't feel like it was work.
No.
Unfortunately, we underpay teachers though. So you had to leave.
That's right.
That's we could have an entire podcast,
Yes.
not just an episode, but like a podcast on the education system and all the different ways that should be improved, right? But for you, I love that you were so intentional at actually looking at what you wanted to do for your profession, for your work, and finding that perfect fit that would give you what you needed, but also help you serve others. What is the best way, other than writing that sentence down like you did and looking at it in the mirror? Is there anything else someone should do to sort of take stock of the things that they do like to do and try to ferret out a way to make an income from those hobbies and passions?
Oh, yes. I have so many exercises. So I'll give you a couple. One is, I call it the common thread theory. And it is where you go back to when you're a little girl. And I have people do this. I ask it on my podcast every single time I do a podcast. And it is, tell me a story, what you were like as a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old. It's very difficult to think on the spot. So I always tell them that I'm going to be asking that ahead of time. And my story is that, because I didn't know my story either, but I thought back to when I was 5, I see myself in a little dress and I'm on stage singing. Now I don't know how to sing, but my mother thought I did. So she kept pushing me to get on the stage and sing. And I just would get out there and spelt it out like she told me to. And people would come around the corner and be listening to me. And I would always think to myself, good, I'm glad you're listening now, because see, I'm not going to do this again for you. I'm not repeating this. And that's how I feel about everything today. I do a podcast. I don't listen back to it. It's already done. And I know that it's good. And I know that people are going to get value from it. So I think it's really important to know yourself so well. So that would be one of the exercises. Go back to when you're a child and what was it that you were doing? And a lot of people say, geez, I don't know. I was climbing trees. I was in the ocean. Okay, then you might need a job that takes you outdoors, because it sounds like you were outdoors all the time. And now you're stuck in a cube and you wonder why you hate it. So that's one. And then another exercise that I really love is, I want you to list all the topics that you know something about. And there, you probably will have 20, 30, 40 topics that you list. And then I want you to star the ones that you really love talking about. It lights you up. You just can't wait to talk about that subject. And then I want you to put next to that subject, how could you monetize that topic? And a perfect example is a girl that I just had as a client, and she was a hairdresser. And every time I'd go to her, she'd say, I'm getting nervous because my hands are starting to kind of hurt. And I just don't know how long I can stand here. Next time I'd go back and I'd say to her, now, don't you really love horses? She's in Scottsdale, by the way. And she said, well, yeah, but I like doing hair. I mean, I love doing hair, but I don't know. There's something wrong about it. And I said, well, would you like to know what's the most money you can make in hair? And she said, well, I can put in hair. Let's see, what are they called? She ties them onto your hair and makes your hair long.
Probably hair extensions.
Oh, extensions. That's the one that gets paid the most. And she said, but now I'd be standing for 5 hours with the same head, putting the extensions in, but it does pay well. And I said, well, I'm just wondering, since you love horses, you love hair, I'm just wondering if you could meld the two. Because I just went to a horse show in Scottsdale and I saw their tails and their manes, and they were all braided and they had diamonds in them. And can you do that? That's what she does now for $25,000 a head. And she said the best part of my clients is they never talk back.
They never talk back, and they look pretty happy, and they stand perfectly still, right? Which is more than the human clients did. I love that story. I love that she went from doing hair to doing equine hair. I love it. What a great case study. Oh, wow. So you mentioned something very early on in our conversation. You said that when you were back in the corporate world, you were a top producer. I think that's a very interesting trait when someone is a top producer, whether they're a top producer in real estate or some other retail sales, whatever it might be. I think it really shows something about your personality because to become a top producer, you have to be sort of that natural born salesperson where you are not afraid to pick up the phone and talk to people, where you are not afraid to close the sale, to get out there. And for a lot of entrepreneurs, there's a big struggle. And that's that they build an amazing product. Sometimes they've attended all the marketing seminars, so they have their marketing sort of dialed in. But what they're missing is that sales skill, or that they just haven't developed it, or it wasn't something that they were naturally born with. And so I always ask top producers in any industry when I run across them is, what are your best tips for helping people get through that struggle of finding it difficult to make a sale?
Oh, I know this answer. I'll tell you, I didn't know all those years I was an executive recruiter. I had no idea that I was in sales. I thought I was in the people business. I thought I was in the helping business and in the career business. So when I became this top producer and I got to go to this conference in Florida, and it was wonderful. And some man came over to me and he said, "So how's business in Arizona?" And I said, "Oh, it's just fabulous." And he said, "So what are your numbers?" And I said, "What?" I thought he was at CPA and that he was at the wrong meeting. I said, "I guess I don't know what you're talking about." And he said, "Well, if you don't know what your numbers are, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard because you're in the biggest game in town." So I went over to my boss and I said, "Rich, what are my numbers?" Because that guy said it's really important. Rich said, "I don't even know what you're talking about." I went back to the guy, told him to teach me what he was talking about, and he gave me gold. And my business went from being a top producer to being the top producer in the state of Arizona because I started working numbers. Those people were still people to me, but now numbers were very important to me. And I didn't know, I hated the thing about let's close on this person. Let's go ahead and do the last thing. So bottom line about selling is it's not about you. It's about what you can do for that other person. And right now with my products, it's not about me, them buying me. It's about them buying my service and what it is that I can do for them, how I can take them from A to Z. It's not about selling. I did this one thing. One of my courses is called Speak to Tell, but then proudly sell, because you should be proud of what it is that you're doing, that you're helping this person get ahead in their world. So yeah, selling has been very important to me because I've never sold anything.
And the numbers are important. Like you said, I think one of the most important things a starting out entrepreneur, someone who is getting their business fundamentals in place, can do is to actually set up their bookkeeping system so that it makes sense, so that things are tracked. If you can't afford a bookkeeper at the beginning, there's so many different ways that you can outsource that in an inexpensive manner. I mean, there's even new companies that will do sort of cloud accounting and cloud bookkeeping for you, where you do get assigned someone, but it's not necessarily someone down the street from you. And then a lot of software is even automatically tracking purchases and different things. So you can pull some spreadsheets and reports. It is so important to know what your numbers are so that you have a real business and you can make changes and you can track your good months versus your not so good months. And strategy is born of knowing where you're starting from, and to also kind of look back and know how far you've come, right?
That's right. And one of the things that guy, I wish I knew his name so I could thank him to this day, because he gave me such a gift by telling me what he meant by the numbers. And I became very good at knowing that I had to interview 10 people to send 3 people out on an interview to one of our companies. And I always would make one placement by doing it that way. And they just became my numbers. So I had to always know that I was interviewing all the time in order to get to the 3, to get to the 1. And that's what I'd say to everybody listening also, is just when you have a call with somebody, how many calls do you have to make to finally get a client? You just have to get very clear on that. Otherwise, you're beating yourself up the whole time, thinking you're doing something wrong.
I agree with this so much. One of my first jobs out of high school was to be a telemarketer. And I had that job in several different capacities. So I wasn't always for the same company and I wasn't even selling the same thing. In fact, at one point during college, I was a telemarketer for a maintenance company. So my job was to call up businesses and ask them, do you have any maintenance issues in your building? You know, we work on concrete, we work on wall repair, we work on plumbing. Is there anything going on that we can come and give you a quote for? So you can sell that. You can sell, I've sold advertising before, and it doesn't really matter what you're selling. What you want to do is make a connection. Yes. But like you said, I was very, very aware that I would pick up the phone X number of times and that I'd usually get X number of appointments out of those rejections, right? So you'd get, rejection, no thank you, hang up on you, don't even listen, let you finish your sentence. Someone lets you finish and politely says no. And then by the time you've made your 20, 30 phone calls, you look down and you've maybe set 3 or 4 appointments. I don't remember what the ratio was, but it was incredible that it was so constant, almost like this invisible hand of statistics where out of a certain number of calls, on average, there'd be kind of the same number of appointments. Like you're saying, it's almost like this magic was at play. And so that does help you as a salesperson not care about rejection because you know that you're going to have a certain number of no's and you just have to get through those. And it makes it a lot easier to be rejected. So that is fantastic advice that you shared, even made me think of my own story from my youth.
Well, and I have to say it was shocking to me because I really did think, and I was in the people business, but a person still has to be your first interview of the day or your third interview of the day. Now, with you, Flavia, I find it interesting that you were a telemarketer because that was our number one choice when we were hiring executive recruiters and was a telemarketer. If they had anything like that in their background, we hired them on the spot because they're not afraid of rejection and they know it's a numbers game. They know they have to pick up that phone so many times to get somebody to pay attention to them.
It's true. It's a valuable skill. In some ways, I encourage anyone who's like, I just got laid off, completely jobless, don't know where to go next. Consider getting a job in telemarketing because you will learn skills. It's almost like a muscle that you will exercise. Your rejection muscle will get so good that no rejection will ever get through your skin again because you truly will be like, okay, next, or you'll start hearing the no's and you'll actually hear not now in your, and you're like, I'll call them back in a month, So it is, consider that anyone who's out there desperate for a job and not knowing what you want to do as what I call a bridge job, which is a job you can have until you really know what business you want to create or what job you want to go for that is your true calling. In the meantime, you got to pay the bills. So get your bridge job. It's a bridge from here to there.
That's right. Good advice.
So what do you do to keep balance? Because I know that anybody in your niche and in the types of business that you do, which is teaching online and helping others, it's very, very easy to become a slave to the phone and to your text messages and to your phone ringing. How do you keep some white space in your own life so that you can do the things that you like to do that are non-work?
So one of the things that I do is I do a lot of self-coaching, and because I did go down that path of when you really care and you really do want somebody to find their niche and monetize it and so on, and they're not quite there yet. And so you call them up again to help them more and they email them and you really get caught up in the moment. And I had to do self-coaching a few years ago because I was off my track of my whole lifestyle versus now I'm just working. What am I thinking? Even though I didn't feel like I was working, I still was. There just were not enough hours in the day. And now I've created something that I have so many hours in the day, I can do anything I want with my day. I just move things around, tweak things all the time. But when I say self-coaching, that means really getting deep with your questions for yourself. On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy am I right now in my business? And if let's say you're an 8, that's pretty good. Well, what could make it a 9 today? And so you start asking yourself these kinds of questions. And how happy am I constantly coaching Mary Sue, let's say, on a scale of 1 to 10? I'm a 9 because she's really coming along. Okay, what would make it a 10? If she started making money. Good. That's what you focus on the next time you talk with her. And so when I started my podcast, that really became the love of my life. And I'll be doing that for years to come because I'm very interested in people and what makes them tick and what made them become what they are today. It's exactly what you're doing, Flavia. It's something that is just a natural talent of yours, as I've heard on so many of your podcasts. And I tell everybody to listen to your podcast. But it's funny, a lot of people that I thought could be an entrepreneur or even a solopreneur, they aren't. They're worker bees, and that's okay. I just want them to be happy on the job then. If they're going to go out and get a job, make sure you understand what you need on that job. Like I had to get my ingredients down, and I can't remember all of them. They're in the book, but I can remember that I said I have to have a professional atmosphere. Or I knew I wouldn't be happy very long. I had to know I was in a position where I was helping other people. Or once again, I wouldn't be happy. I had to be able to communicate with people and teach them something. That was really important. And I taught them how to interview. I had to make the money I deserved with what I knew. I knew that was very important. I didn't want to do that $18,000 a year thing. And so it's just knowing those kinds of things about yourself through the deep questions and the self-coaching that self-awareness is king. The more you know about yourself, the more successful you will be in life.
Truths, complete truths. I mean, those speak to my soul. How do your programs help people through these big questions? I mean, you've developed these amazing programs. Tell us a little bit about the programs themselves.
Well, your gift is your niche in particular is one that you have to have a foundation, and the foundation is you. When you're going down this path of trying to figure out what is my niche, for heaven's sake, what is my gift? I actually changed it for a while from your gift is your niche because people would say to me, Patricia, I don't have a gift. But you do. All of us do. And you have to dig to find it. And the reason you don't know that it's a gift is because it's so natural for you. Just like me, I'm not nervous about getting on stage or in front of people because I've been doing it since I was 5. And so I think nothing of that. That doesn't mean that I'm a good singer because I'm not. I'm so afraid somebody's going to ask me to sing someday, but I'm a speaker and I'm in front of a room all the time. So you have to do things that you're comfortable with and that you're natural with. But I thought everybody was natural at doing that until I found out that like 95% of the people are frightened as they can be because they think it's about them. And it's not. So in your gift is your niche, that's what we start with. Who are you? What are you about? Really dissecting that whole thing. Here are your gifts, Mary Sue. Here are your talents and skills that you came into the world with. Recognize them, honor them, and now let's see what we can do to monetize them. And that's what we get into next is, okay, how do you monetize this gift for me in particular, being on stage? And well, naturally, it would be a professional speaker. And that's what I did for many years. Now, what is it? I'm still a teacher. I'm teaching right now because that's who I am at the core of who I am. And even in my book, Discovering Your Core, I love it because I came up with these questions and I call them the WHYS questions, WHYSE. And they kept correcting it for me when I was getting it published. And no, I want to call it why, WHY, because if I ask you a question, what did you always want to be when you grew up? And somebody answers me an astronaut, I have to ask why, because that's where the real answer is in the why. So that we do a lot of that in Your Gift is Your Niche. In all of my programs, they're all about really deep questions and knowing yourself, because that is the foundation.
That's amazing. Well, I won't ask you to sing a duet with me on the podcast because I know you don't want to sing. And actually, I'm not a singer either.
Oh, good.
You're off the hook. You're off the hook. But something that you've taught several times, just even to me here on this podcast segment, is talking about looking at your childhood and seeing the sorts of things that you loved to do, that drove you, that pulled you. And wouldn't it be great as parents or educators, this is great for teachers as well, to really spend time with kids when they're in those formative years. Like you said, 6, 7 years old, 5 years old, probably all the way through the rest of elementary school. Wouldn't it be amazing to keep some sort of a record, a journal, like a mini memoir, where as a parent or a teacher, you constantly ask kids, once a month or something, what are the things you're enjoying the most? What do you love to do? What is fun for you? And to really chronicle that so that when the kids grow up, when they're 18 and trying to find themselves, you can hold this little book and say, look, this is probably what drives you. When you read this, the words that you wrote when you were 10, does it still resonate? And if you see that 18 or 19-year-old's eyes light up, then maybe that's the compass they needed.
Yes. It's the biggest mistake that I think I've made. People say to me, do you have any regrets? And there's part of me that says, no, I've lived the life that I was chosen to live. But the one regret is when I was a school teacher and I was so young, just like them. That's why, I was 21 when I was teaching, and I'm teaching these little second graders. And they would say to me almost every day, Mrs. Drain, what should I be when I grow up? I'm getting nervous. And I'd say, honey, don't worry. You're only in the second grade. Now I would say, okay, honey, let's start digging. And let's start figuring out what you're really good at, because I know I'm your teacher. I see what you're really good at. And I would never teach a different way. Again, I would still do the science and the math and the spelling and all the things I was told I had to do, but I would have a self-discovery piece in there also. So that kid, when he grew up to be 18 or 19, he'd say, you know what Mrs. Drain said I'm really good at? Composure, or the way I stand, or my appearance, or whatever it would be. That would stay with that child forever. If somebody had said that to you, Flavia, wouldn't that have stayed with you forever?
Truly, forever. So,
Yep.
Which is why we have to be careful with our words, because the kids will also hold on to the negative forever.
Yes. Yeah, I was taught by nuns, and there was a lot of negativity that I saw. Maybe other people didn't, but I felt it and saw it because I remember one of the nuns saying to me, and see, you do remember, words are powerful. And she said, Patricia, I was Patsy then. Patsy, whatever you do when you grow up, I really don't want you to be writing anything because you're the worst writer I've ever read. So don't do that, okay? And now I've authored 12 books, and I know I did it because of her, because I probably shouldn't have authored 12 books. I don't know. I just have to share. I'm a teacher. I have to share what it is that works and what I know is good for somebody and what will help somebody.
Were you cheeky? Did you autograph a copy of each of the 12 books and just send them? No explanation to that?
I never thought of that. It never even dawned on me. I just thought at the time, I thought the power that we have over some other people from a teacher standpoint or from a mother standpoint, it's huge. And I still say to my children, do not write a book about me saying, Mommy dearest, when I'm gone. Don't do that. I don't have any idea what I did to harm you. Yeah, I did the best I could, as we all did. But I think people don't realize, Flavia, what you said so naturally, that words are, they're damaging, or they're things that can make you thrive.
Well, I just said to you, well, I'm not a singer either. And, when I was in elementary school, probably fourth or fifth grade, maybe, I remember going out for chorus. There was a little chorus you could audition for, and you'd stand up and they'd make you do the do, re, mi scale. And I remember being, I guess, oblivious to, I just figured I was a good singer, didn't really know one way or the other. And the chorus director had me do the scales and said, no, you can leave. You don't have an ear for music.
Oh.
And I turned red and I left, as a little kid, you're like, oops, sorry, didn't mean, I thought I might be good. I had no idea. And I wonder if that's why it's so easy for me to say to you or to anyone, like, oh, I'm not a singer. Like, it's just not what I do. Who knows? I could have been Britney Spears if that person had never said that to me.
That's right. No, I'm serious. You don't know that. Nobody does. We say to ourselves, well, I'm not really a singer, let's say. And who knows that you could have been the greatest singer that ever happened. I'm really not a writer. Well, what if you have a New York bestseller in you and you just have never released it because somebody told you probably shouldn't write? Yeah, it's really too bad. The only thing that, and I would like to ask you this, Flavia, this is a really deep question, I think. What would you say about people that get on American Idol because they have been told their whole life that they're really good, and they get on American Idol and they are not good at all, and they're devastated, they're crying, they're leaving, you can see it on TV, it's very sad. What would you say about that? Did somebody encourage them and they shouldn't have?
Well, it's funny you ask that because I teach audition prep for a very competitive type of dance audition, professional cheerleading. I have a background in sports entertainment.
Oh.
I was a pro cheerleader for a couple of years, and then I worked behind the scenes. I've directed teams, judged auditions left and right. So I wrote the book on it. I can actually say I wrote the book on it. So it is. If you go to cheerleadingbook.com, you can go and see the book I wrote on how to become an NFL, NBA, or other pro cheerleader. And it's traumatic. Any rejection is traumatic.
Yeah, but how did I know I was asking a pro, for heaven's sake? So seriously, what do you say to that? Because if you're this pro and you've written the book on it, that that you cannot say to this one child, you are a 10, when that child is a 1, just not doing it at all, can't do it. What do you do in a case like that?
Well, let's talk through this because this is actually very topical right now, right? People are saying, is it okay to say we're not giving any awards or trophies? Let's give every kid on the team a trophy. Let's not have winners and losers, because you also want to teach how to excel and you want to teach some level of competitive behavior in kids. And you want people to go for the very best and even push themselves and compete against themselves. But you also don't want to create this little trauma monster where somebody is like feeling they're not good enough or feeling discouraged or, having a scar from some sort of rejection. And it kind of circles back to our conversation about sales, because as humans, rejection is very painful, but in the real world, we are going to face rejection. There may be that cute person you want to talk to and they don't want to talk to you. You may propose marriage and the person doesn't say yes. There may be a job you want and they interviewed, you worked in recruiting. There may be 10 people that got interviewed and 9 are going to be disappointed because there's only one job. And it's tough. I don't have an answer. I do coach people through it as a way to give them comfort and sort of in a way therapy after a big rejection like that. And the best advice to give to someone that suffered a huge rejection is to help them through it so that they can see that it's part of life and that it wasn't necessarily personal. Sometimes it's a numbers game. There's 5 openings and, 100 people trying out for the 5 openings. And so statistically, there's going to be a lot of very talented people that don't get what they're going for, and that it's not a measure of self-worth. It's also not a measure of self-worth to be the winner, to be good at something. You don't have to be a wonderful singer to be a worthy human. And I guess the jury's out. Maybe I can sing. I've just never, tried after that little rejection that I suffered. But whether or not I sing, it has no real bearing or relevance in what I'm doing. I'm a very happy, balanced person. And maybe that wasn't for me. And that's okay too. You don't have to get everything you go for. You don't have to win at everything you try. When, sometimes you can just sit and shoot hoops, and it doesn't matter that only 1 in 10 go through the hoop.
Well, Flavia, you said you didn't have an answer. You had the most beautiful answer I've heard, because what you're telling me is telling them the statistics of what really is real in the real world. 10 jobs, only one person's going to get that, or 10 people, one person's going to get the job. But it sounds like you leave these people with the cheerleading and all of the things that you do with their dignity still, by sharing with them that not everybody can win. That does not mean you're not really good at what you do. That's very good.
And with every rejection, we've gotten better. I mean, we really, with every job interview you do, you've learned something. You maybe learned something about that employer, learned something about yourself, even just learned how to be a better interviewee. And, it's part of the life journey, because we it's a philosophical question, right? But we define what the win was. And sometimes we define it incorrectly. Like if someone climbs Mount Everest and they're mad because they were trying to do it within a certain period of time and maybe they went over, that wasn't a loss. If they made it to the top, maybe that was still a win. They just had a definition problem, because we have to look at things and really ask ourselves, am I defining that correctly? Like, what is the win here that I'm going for? And maybe I'm being a little bit inaccurate.
Well, I think that's brilliant. I wanted to really, is there really a .com that's about cheerleading? Was that just...
Oh, yes.
Oh, tell me.
Like when you were talking about your niche cheer dance world, there's a whole world that is centered around cheerleading, but also the greater world of dance. I was the #1 bestseller in a category on Amazon that was called the Performing Arts Auditions category, because I had this book on acing auditions. And I think it was a great book. I poured my heart into it. And I think everyone, if you're out there and you regularly let people pick your brain, what I mean is somebody calls you and you can talk to them for 45 minutes to help them through something, whatever it might be, you probably have a book in you. Because I would get calls from people saying, hey, so-and-so didn't make it onto the Raiderettes or whatever they're going for. They're really sad, and you help people, you've coached people through this. Can you just talk to her and see what went wrong? And maybe you can give her advice for next year's audition. And so I'd have these calls all the time. And I realized I was giving pretty much the same advice over and over. And so, yes, that means you write a book on it. And I did. And I think everyone out there listening, if you're like, yeah, I am kind of always getting those calls. I am letting people take me to lunch to pick my brain on that same topic time after time after time, write a book.
That's good. I think you're just the best interviewer today. You're doing a fabulous job. I'm pretending like I'm interviewing you now.
Well, I love it. I love talking to you. You're just a great person to have these kinds of conversations. Some of them went into the philosophical. So yes, I agree that we went maybe a little off track, not sticking just to lifestyle solopreneurship. One last thing I want to chat with you about is the millennials, because you love helping millennials. Talk to us a little bit about, what is a millennial to you? Like when you categorize millennials, what are the traits? What are the common challenges? What are the things that you help them through? And why do you love working with millennials so much?
I think they get such a bad reputation. I don't think they have such a bad reputation. And I work with all these millennials, and it's a misinformation, because that's not who they are. They're the people that are supposed to be, they just expect things to come to them. And of course, all of us have at some time. But I realized as I work with them that they are the reason that things will change for the better, because they're not accepting what it is that we accepted as the norm. In other words, 8 to 6. working. They don't want to do those kinds of things. They want a life instead. They're the real lifestyle builders for sure. And I just love them for that. And yet they're still knowledgeable. They're still smart. Most of them don't know what to be when they grow up either. And they graduated from school now and wonder what to do. But I think like a millennial. I have a millennial mindset, and I'll tell you why. When I started working at that executive recruiting firm, I remember going into him after I'd been there a couple of weeks, and I said, I'm probably going to have to work from home quite a bit. And he said, what? And I said, well, see, the drive here, I'm in major traffic at 8:00 and then again at 6:00, and I'm wasting an hour on each side. And that's just silly. I just want to, produce at home. And he said, you've been here 2 weeks. No, you're not going to be at home, because he had nobody working at home at that time. Now it's a great thing that's being done. But that's how a millennial thinks. They really think about their time as so valuable and that they want to be so productive during that time. They're turning 40 now. And I do feel bad for a lot of them, because I never want them to buy my book, What Should I Be When I Grow Up, now that I'm 40, 50, 60. I want them to discover that when they're 25, when they're 30, what it is that they should do with their life, with their skills, with their gifts. And they don't know that either. It's not like we grew up and became a boomer and then said, well, really, what are my talents and my gifts? Because trust me, most boomers don't know. But now I see that the millennial doesn't either, because self-discovery has not been part of their world either. But they think differently and they want different things. And it's not the norm anymore of what they want. They see that the gold watch didn't work. The longest they are in a job, and I just looked it up actually today, is 3 years. Well, when I was an executive recruiter, that's exactly what my employers were looking for. Somebody that had only been in a job 2 to 3 years, because they didn't want to hire a dinosaur that didn't learn the new technology and all the new ways of doing things. See, the millennial just gets that because they grew up in that. So yeah, I like them for so many reasons. They're so sharp, and they're just, and at least the millennials I'm around, they listen and they're paying attention because their life is important to them.
And so for the millennials as well as the non-millennials, how do people reach out to you to connect further and also to check out your programs?
Yeah, well, what I'd like to offer to your audience today is something free. I haven't done this for a very long time, but I call it, I Can See Clearly Now, strategy session. And I'd like to say, the first 10 people that say Patricia at patriciadrain.com, that's DRAIN.com, I would like to take you on a trip. And it's a wonderful trip to go on, because it's all about you. And it's all about getting very clear about who you are and what you want in your life. And we do it in a very quick way. I created this wonderful, I don't call it a template, but I call it I'm trying to think, system maybe, a system that I came up with that I've watched it help people over and over for so many years. So I thought maybe I'd throw that out, but you can go to patriciadrain.com. That's my main site, or Patricia Noel Drain.com. And you can go to Your Gift Is Your Niche with an E, NICHE.com, and either of those places. And of course, I'm on Facebook and all the others, Instagram, LinkedIn.
That is such a generous offer. Everyone listening, definitely call in, take her up on it, because there's going to be a lucky 10 that get to do that. And if you're saying to yourself, oh, probably 10 people already took the slots, you'd be surprised at how many people don't seize the day. Yes, there may have been hundreds who thought, oh, I want that, but they just didn't go to the site and they didn't reach out to Patricia. So be the one to actually seize the day. Connect with Patricia. It's been a fabulous, fabulous interview today. I've enjoyed speaking with you immensely. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a guest today.
Oh, thank you, Flavia. Well, I thought you were my guest today. I'm sorry. You were fabulous. I loved everything that fell out of your mouth.
Well, it was a perfect, perfect day. So thanks again. And I hope to connect with you soon.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, and if you leave a review on iTunes, I promise I will read every single review. If you know someone who makes a full-time living from part-time work, and maybe this is you, please visit lifestylesolopreneur.com to nominate a guest or to nominate yourself. Because remember this, money doesn't buy happiness. But money in the hands of a happy person, there is no greater tool.
Today's episode was brought to you by the Get Shift Done program. It's a lifestyle-changing online class to help you define your business and lifestyle ambitions. and to set goals in a way you've never experienced before. This class will 10x your daily productivity with methods that will blow your mind. And if you use a coupon code podcast, the class tuition is 99% off. Visit GetShiftDone.com to enroll today.